Age-related cognitive decline or dementia was a major source of discussion amongst my family, and it probably happened at yours family get-together as well over the holidays. So let's talk about what is age-related cognitive decline, how does it happen, how do we treat it, and then in the end, I'll discuss ways that we can prevent it in the first place. So for our first video, let's go over what exactly is dementia, how does it work, what's the physiology behind it. So as an analogy, think about your brain like a tree that has a trunk that comes up from the ground, and then the branches spread apart, and then you have this canopy that's formed with all the leaves of the tree kind of coordinating and communicating with one another at the top. So when it comes to your brain, the top layer, that canopy where those millions and trillions of leaves are, those are the cells of the cortex, which are responsible for higher cognition, thinking, language, memory, controlling emotion, orientation, in other words, getting lost or knowing where you are. All the higher functioning happens in the cortex. So that's where the thinking happens. And I've heard the analogy that human beings are thinkers, feelers, and survivors. So the thinking portion of the human being is in the brain, in the cortex. The next is the limbic system, and that's down in the middle. That's the central part of the trunk, and that's what's responsible for emotion and feeling. It's called the limbic system. And then deeper in the trunk is something called the midbrain or the brainstem, and that's responsible for reflexes, survivor type things. So again, this disease affects that canopy, it affects the cortex. If you look at MRIs of people with this disease, you actually see cortical thinning of that layer as the disease progresses. So these neurons, these cells are dying and receding, and it's causing all the symptoms of Alzheimer's. So the most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's. That's 60 to 80% of all dementia that we're aware of. And it's characterized by deposition of an abnormal plaque called tau protein or amyloid. The next most common cause is a vascular dementia. So that's dementia caused by anything that affects blood flow. Stroke, diabetes, high blood pressure, head injury. So in our analogy, those are the branches that are going out to the leaves and feeding those neurons. And then the next most common type is something called Lewy body dementia, which is also deposition of an abnormal protein. And then the last one is something called frontotemporal dementia. So all of these diseases are characterized either by an abnormal deposition of protein into the neurons or some sort of blood supply issue to the neurons. And in summary, there are three main factors that contribute to these diseases. Number one is genetic, number two is lifestyle, and number three is environmental. So you can't do anything about your genetics, but we can certainly talk about environmental and lifestyle effects as ways of potentially preventing this. In our next video, we're going to talk about how we can treat dementia, and then in our last video, we'll talk about things that we can do to prevent it from happening in the first place.